So I've written 3 books now. The first book is called Evolve Your Brain, The Science of Changing Your Mind. The second book is called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One. And then I have a new one coming out next month in the United States called You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter. And it'll be released in Spanish, I think, at the end of the year. And so I teach workshops based on those books around the world and teach people the tools and the principles to make the necessary changes within themselves and at the same time create the life that they like.
And how people can do that changes in life?
Well, that's the $54 billion question. But we now know that there's a science to change. And we now know that if you teach people the proper steps of change, they'll begin to see significant changes in their health and in their life. So, to change is to be greater than your environment, to be greater than the conditions in your life, to no longer allow the people and the problems and the things in your life to keep causing you to think in familiar ways. To change is to be greater than your body. By the time we're 35 years old, we've conditioned the body to be the mind, and that's what a habit is. So our automatic habits and our emotional addictions and our attitudes are for the most part thinking and feeling in the past. So when the body becomes the mind, then to change is to be greater than the body. And to be greater than time means that you every day have the ability to find the present moment and not be anticipating the predictable future based on the memory of the past. And when you simplify it in a way that people can begin to practice managing their inner thoughts and inner world, if they continuously do that enough times, their biology changes, and their neurocircuitry changes, and their genetics change, and they begin to express a new self. So it takes some practice, it takes quite a bit of learning, but we have enough people now around the world that are doing it pretty consistently, so we know it works.
Why people have a lot of problems to change, to make the next step?
Most people are afraid of the unknown. We all are. And when you change, you have to go from the old self to the new self. And there's a space between. And that void, that place of uncertainty or unknown, is what we have to become familiar in. We have to become comfortable in. So most people, when they start to change and they're no longer complaining and feeling sorry for themselves or feeling guilty or thinking negative thoughts, they don't feel like themselves any longer. So the moment they don't feel like themselves, they go back to doing the things that make them feel like themselves, and they return back to the same self. Crossing that river from the old self to the new self, people understand that there's going to be a biological death going on. Neurocircuitry and chemistry and addictions beginning to change emotionally. When they begin to understand that, then they'll begin to create from that place of the unknown. That's the best place to create from. So most people try to white knuckle it. They try to change and they try to stop themselves from doing certain things. But inhibiting those things isn't enough. We have to create a new sense of being, a new sense of self, to such a degree that they don't go unconscious again. And then create a new self, and every day remind themselves of how they're going to think, how they're acting, and how they're feeling. In time, they cross that river, and then when they arrive, there's new opportunities, there's new doors that open for them, there's new things that are created because they're becoming somebody else.
Tell me, how or why did you start to making this change? Why?
Well, I was probably your age. I was in my early 20s, and I was in a triathlon in California, and I got run over by a truck in a triathlon, and I broke 6 bones in my back, and was supposed to be paralyzed for the rest of my life. And so I decided to go against the surgery and see if I could change my body by changing my mind. And I accomplished it. It wasn't easy, but I did. And I just made a deal with myself that if I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying what I'm doing. And so since that injury and my recovery, there's been a huge shift in consciousness around the world. More and more people are embracing these, concepts, not only from a philosophical standpoint, but from a practical standpoint. And that's the exciting part. They used to say that genes create disease. That was a scientific paradigm. And then they said, well, we actually lied. It's the environment that signals the gene that creates the disease. But how can two people be working in the same environment and both be exposed to a carcinogenic cancer chemical, and one gets cancer and the other doesn't? So certainly there's an internal order that is still the outside of the cell chemically that keeps certain genes regulated and other genes not. In other words, epigenetics means above the gene. So there are thousands and thousands of variations on the same gene in your body. And so when people begin to realize that they're not victims to their reality, but they're their own genetic engineers, and that they can change their genes by doing things differently, by thinking differently, by behaving differently, by feeling differently, by experiencing different things, that we're not doomed by our genetic inheritance, but in fact, genes are parts lists of potentials. They're libraries of possibility. So then the question is, how do we signal the right gene in the right way? How do we activate that right gene? And that's what our work is about.
And that's the reason why we got sick.
Yeah, I think 9 out of 10 people, according to some scientific research, get sick because of stress. 9 out of 10. And stress is when your body's knocked out of balance. So most people become knocked out of balance, and they begin to become more and more knocked out of balance because it's their thoughts. They start thinking about things that are going to happen in their life, or their problems, or past events. They produce the same chemistry as if the event is happening. Well, it's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease. But if you can turn on stress by thought alone, then your thoughts can make you sick. So if your thoughts can make you sick, then your thoughts make you well. And the answer is yes.
The emotions are kind of an addiction.
Yeah, the stress hormone emotions, because they're emergency. And so when you feel fear, when you feel worry, when you feel anger, when you feel judgment, you're giving your body a rush of adrenaline. And we begin to become subconsciously addicted to that emotional rush so that we can feel the charge of energy. And so people keep the problems and conditions in their life because it reminds them of their addiction. That's why change is so hard, because if you're going to break that addiction, you're going to all of a sudden, just like an addict, go through withdrawals.
What can I do if I already tune my mind to help other people?
The greatest way is to be the example. Look, if you're not reacting to problems and conditions in your life, and you're not automatically knee-jerking or doing things that you typically have done, people are going to notice that right away. And if you're not judging them or reacting to them, and you're loving them, they're going to pay attention to what you're doing, and they're going to do the same thing to somebody else. So the greatest way that we can help people to change is be the example of everything we want people to be.
So what is reality?
A reality is your life. Well, reality is everything that takes place, I say. Reality is wherever your awareness is. So if your awareness is on your problems, then that's your reality. If your awareness is on your face and your hairstyle, that's your reality. If your awareness is on getting ready for the worst thing that could happen to you, that's your reality. If your awareness is on judging politicians and judging people, then that's your reality. So I always say reality is wherever your awareness is.
How I can start to making changes?
If you decided you truly wanted to change, the first thing that has to happen is you have to have an intention, a vision. Who does George want to be in a year from now? What thoughts do you want to think? What behaviors do you want to demonstrate? How would it feel to arrive at that vision? And if you were to revisit that vision every day and reminded yourself of who you wanted to be, then you should also take a look at the things that stop you from arriving at that vision. the thoughts that you unconsciously think. I'll never get there, it's too hard. My father was an alcoholic, I'll never change. Do you complain? Do you make excuses? Do you feel sorry for yourself? Do you judge other people? What actions do you take? What emotions do you feel? Do you feel unworthy? Do you feel insecure? Because if you're creating a vision of success or leadership, a leader doesn't feel unworthy. A leader doesn't feel insecure. So you can't bring that into your future. So write down the thoughts that you no longer want to think, the behaviors you no longer want to demonstrate, and the emotions you no longer want to feel, and review that list. So and your job then is to maintain that state of being the rest of your day. And if you do, something unusual will happen in your life. That's the law.
What are the characteristics that people that have already changed their mind have?
Oh, they're very happy. They're more fearless. They have a lot more courage. They're very charismatic. They're usually very healthy. They're more giving. They're more caring. They're more willful. They're more conscious. And they have a whole lot of energy.
And this of changing your mind is the same as fate?
No. Well, there's kind of an interesting duality because there's free will and then there's fate or destiny, right? Predetermined destiny. But if you're changing your state of being willfully, then your destiny is equal to that change. If you are not creating reality, then you're subjected to any random event that could happen to you because you're not creating reality. In other words, people say, I didn't create that car accident, I didn't create my brother committing suicide, or I didn't create my fall and hurting my knee. Well, you actually did create that car accident by not creating it. You did create you losing your job by not creating it. So, we want people to always be creating. And if they're not creating, then they're thinking in the past.
If people in the world are together changing their mind, the world will be better?
Well, I think so. That's why I'm doing this. I mean, if you're taking care of your hostility and your anger, and I'm taking care of my fear and my anxiety, and someone else is taking care of their judgment and their competition, and we're all doing that, then everybody's taking care of themselves. You're going to see a whole greater world show up.
Why would you tell to people that say that you are a fraud?
I'm a fraud?
Fraud?
Sí, yeah, fraud.
A fraud? I'd say you're allowed your truth. And I don't really care what people think of me anymore because we have enough scientific evidence now that I know that I'm making a difference in people's lives. And if I wasn't making a difference, I certainly wouldn't be doing this.
Where people can find you? They can go to Walter Center?
So you can go to my website. It's just drjoedispenza.com, DISPENZA. They can order my books on Amazon. There's a YouTube channel where there's tons of information. Juan Carlos, one of my trainers here, has a lot of resources to help people. So.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.